I'm Chris from Tom's Outdoors. I've ducked up here tonight to 3 Mile Dam for a really quick snow camp. I'm going to give you a run through on some of the tips and tricks that I've learned over the years to make it comfortable and enjoyable to camp here on the snow. Look at that. Look at that glow. How cool is that? Pretty good to be able to just head up to the snow and pitch a tent, camp for the night. I've just used a MSR reactor. I really like the reactors or the wind burners. The wind burner's a little bit detuned. These sort of alpine conditions, those two stoves are virtually windproof, so it's really good to have something that is going to work no matter what the conditions. One of my tips for melting water, always try and have a little bit of liquid water to put in the bottom of the pot. When you start to dump snow on it with things like the reactor, that generates so much heat that at the bottom what can happen is it will keep boiling off the snow and you won't actually get a lot of melt. So having 50 ml of water in the bottom that then gets hot really accelerates and helps you to melt that snow. Got myself a little 4-season tent here. It's technically a 2-man. It's a very tight 2-man. This is a little single skin rab. Tent choice in the mountains is really important. There you can vary your choice depending on what the conditions are going to be, but also where you are. So if you're subalpine, you're amongst the tree line a little bit like we are here, you could actually get away with more of a 3-season tent, preferably with a full liner. But if you are somewhere exposed, somewhere that there's bad weather coming, or you're on the main range or you're in the Victorian Alps and you're fully exposed, you really need a 4-season tent. You need it to be bomber, you need to use snow pegs, and you need to potentially dig it in to protect it from the worst of the weather and the wind. I nearly always take a snow shovel with me for that exact reason, being able to dig out a footwell or being able to dig a wall for your tent is really vital in the Australian conditions, which are often quite windy. We don't get big dumps of snow at once. Typically they're going to happen 3 or 4 times a year in a big storm, so you're not necessarily needing to dig yourself out, but you might be needing to dig yourself in away from the wind. Find with winter snow camping, you want to be fairly self-disciplined with where you've got everything. You don't want to leave things lying around outside. There's a chance they're going to become covered in snow if it's snowing. One of the main things you want to be really careful of too is not getting any snow and moisture inside your tent. This tent's actually a little mountaineering tent, but because of that, the door opens into the tent and it's really hard to not get snow in there. And the same goes for all your gear. You don't want to be wet. If you get wet, there's a chance that you're going to get cold later on. So you really want to try and keep everything as dry as possible, and pack everything in little dry bags separately. So if you do have wet items, like a wet tent that's going into your bag, then that item's not going to make your down jacket wet, which is really important to your survival if it gets cold. Really important in an Australian alpine area to have a good layering system. So if it's sunny a little bit like it was today, and you're working hard snowshoeing or skinning up a slope, it could be 5 or 6 degrees and you might be all the way down to a base layer. As it starts to cool down, you're going to be putting on your mid layer like I've got now, and then you're going to be putting on your shell to block a bit of wind. If you're skiing downhill or you've just crested a hill on some snowshoes, you really want to put that shell layer back on so you're blocking the wind and you're fundamentally keeping your core warm. What you don't want to do is you don't want to be wet and sweaty, so you really want to, if you're starting to get too hot, you need to stop and take a layer off. You don't want to go, hey, I'm going to get to the top of the hill and then I'll cool down. You're already wet. If you're wet, you're potentially cold. So it's really important to manage your layer system. As the evening's starting to come on, you may want to, and you stopped and you're static at camp, you may want to take your shell off. And this is where your static warm layer comes in. So thick synthetic, thick down jacket, something with a bit of warmth to it. I've got a really lightweight, compact down jacket in here. Doesn't really matter who it comes from, it needs to be warm. So once you stop and you're starting to cool down and the night's starting to cool down, you really want to stop and I'll zip that up, it's a little bit chilly. You really want to stop and put your warm layer on, because above all you want to preserve your warmth. Don't be afraid to use your sleeping bag as part of your system. You know, get in there and keep the bottom half of your torso warm. If you're sat around outside, you're going to keep chilling down. So it's really important to, above all, keep warm. Otherwise, it's going to be a real struggle when you do go to bed to get warm. It's been quite a warm day, and getting a lot of glare coming back off the snow today. So really important to put some sun protection on, sun cream, zinc. Make sure you get around the face and underneath as well, because you're going to get that snow bouncing back up. I personally don't like wearing a buff or a tube neck protector. Some guys do, or people do. So if you do throw one of those on, it's going to really stop anything from burning you up underneath. Also consider, if it is, you know, spring touring where you know that they're going to be sunny days, really consider a lightweight sun top, which is more something that we see in fly fishing or as a summer garment, but they dry really quick. They don't keep you warm, but they do block the sun. So the advantage is that you're going to stop that burn over your head and any of that reflected sun coming in. Our Australian alpine can get cold. Some of the recorded temperatures up around Charlotte's Pass are down into that -20 on those record nights. Typically we're not hitting those really low temperatures. Where we are here up around 3 Mile Dam, we're looking at, it was -5 overnight. So we get cold, but we don't get super cold like North American cold. So really important to consider how we use our mats and what sort of system we use. For me personally, I've been camping in the snow like this for about 15 years, and I only use one mat. So I've got a Thermarest Xtherm with an R value of 5. I've used it for the last 7 years. Now I find that sufficient to not get any cold through from the snow. I'm not leaving a divot in the snow, which means I'm not losing any heat out of my sleeping bag through my mat. If you've got a mat that's around an R value 3, you're probably going to want to supplement that for winter. Those mats are great for summer, spring and autumn. They just don't quite cut it when you've got a block of ice underneath you. So you may want to supplement it with something like a Thermarest Z-Lite, a lightweight foam mat that's going to give you another 2 as far as an R value goes, and it's going to bump you up to around that 5 mark, which is where you want to be. I don't feel that those mats are necessary if you've got a mat that's around an R value of 5. For Australian conditions, in my personal experience, I found it to be excess to carry one of those mats. You're looking at carrying about an extra 400 grams and they're bulky. So if it's not needed, don't carry one. If you do use an R value 3 and you find it's cold, grab hold of one of those lightweight mats, that's going to bump you up, or buy a new mat just for winter that's got a higher R value if you're doing a lot of winter activities. Safety is pretty important in situations like this, especially if you're solo. So, you know, always carrying a PLB, really important. Something like a Garmin InReach is really good to carry as well. Does give you that two-way communication. There's a couple more devices on the market now that are using satellite communication that can link with your mobile phone. Key thing with your mobile phone, I've got mine sat down here at the moment, put it in your pocket, try and keep it warm. Typically mobile phone batteries don't like to be out in the cold, so overnight you're probably going to want to sleep with it in your sleeping bag. Otherwise, you're just going to lose all your battery power. And if you are relying on this as a communication device linked to, say, one of those other things like a InReach, then you really need to keep some charge in that. Same goes if you're carrying a backup battery or a portable battery that you're going to use to charge this up, then you're going to want to keep that in your sleeping bag or somewhere warm overnight, otherwise it's going to go flat. Alright, if you do manage to get some of your gear wet, particularly your clothing, you're going to have to try and dry it out. So we're pretty lucky here in Australia that chances are you're going to have a fairly warm sunny day like it is today. If your sleeping bag gets wet with condensation overnight, you're going to be able to pull it out of the tent and spread it across the top of the tent in an effort to dry it out, especially drying it out internally. It's really critical. As far as clothing and things goes, wearing your thermals, even though they're a bit damp, to bed in your sleeping bag is going to dry them out with your body heat overnight. And the same thing, potentially you can dry out, you know, your socks and things like that in the bottom of your sleeping bag. The downside of that is you are adding moisture back in there. You don't really want to have too much sweat. So if you've got something that's really saturated, the thing about trying to dry it out in your bag overnight, it's just going to make you wet and cold. So you really don't want to do that and chill yourself down. So you've got to consider each situation. So long as you've got your base layer and fundamentally you yourself dry, then you can deal with some of that other moisture in the morning. Building a fire in the snow. Rules vary from state to state. If you're in a Victorian alpine area, then you're not allowed any fires at all. Within Kosciuszko, you're looking at whether it's alpine or subalpine, so effectively within the trees. Now if you're making a fire, it's really important to consider that if you do light a fire just on the snow, it's actually going to melt down. So eventually it's going to get down through the snow, particularly if it's a hot fire. It's going to melt itself down and then it's going to leave a scar on the ground. And that's exactly like you walking through an area in spring or summer, lovely field, hey, I'm just going to light a fire over there and destroy some, you know, critical alpine grasses. What you want to do if you're going to light a fire on the snow is you want to build a raft of timber, and then you're going to want to pack it with snow and then build another raft. Effectively you're building an insulated bed and then you light your fire on top. Then what happens is it burns down, it puts itself out and it never gets down back to ground level and back to that level of the grass. Another thing with stoves and water is managing your fresh water. One of the chores at the end of the day or end of the evening is making sure you've got water again and melt water for having a drink overnight. Chances are if you boil your water of an evening and put it in, it takes a fair while to cool down. It is going to cool down overnight. It does lessen the chance of your water freezing overnight. One of the things to do with your water overnight is to pop it into a jacket to help keep it warm, or you can put it in your sleeping bag to stop it from freezing. It's really important that you've got some liquid water the next morning or the next day, and then just to even start when you're melting snow again first thing in the morning. Camping in the snow isn't something that we usually associate with Australia and Australian conditions. You know, we're normally about beaches and deserts and, you know, camping in the bush as well, the forests. It is here and it is available to us. It's not something that you've got to fly off to some exotic destination. I hope I've given you a bit of an overview as to how to and what you might need to look at to enjoy camping in the mountains in winter. If you got any questions, don't hesitate to give us a call or send us an email in store, and I'll run through them, and more than happy to spend some time chatting to someone that's interested in camping in the Australian Alps.